guys, thanks for joining me. I am going to show you all a very quick lesson on how to create kind of a little custom shadow and a little custom light source that you can use for kind of whatever you want. I've used it for some of my branding. I kind of wanted my logo and slogan to sort of look like it was casting the shadow. I think of a loft as being sort of up high, so that's why it's sort of referencing that. But you could use this for anything. It could be as a custom shadow for a person or an object, whatever you're creating in Illustrator, and because it's vector artwork, it's going to be nice and small. So first thing I'm going to do over here is just grab my logo. I know it's not going to be exactly like the other, but this is kind of your starting point. The next thing you're going to do is go into your tools panel and click on the ellipse tool. Remember that if there's a little arrow at the bottom and you click and hold, you can see lots of other tools. So I'm going to do the ellipse. I am going to set it without a stroke. And I'm going to double check that my black is the blackest black because I just do that. I'm also going to swap over my color mode over to RGB before I get started on work, although everything's in black and white on this, so it's not really making a big difference, but it's a good practice to get into in case you are working with very specific colors because they often have a pretty decent change between CMYK and RGB. Okay. So you kind of just have to start somewhere. I'm looking to line up my center right with the center of loft because that's kind of what I want to be casting. Now you want to dive in and grab your gradient tool. This object, I've done Illustrator for so many years now, and this tool still sometimes tricks me up. So you got to just start. I like to get in there. I come over to my windows. If it's not open, click up on window and go to gradient. You can make this however you want it to be and customize it. So right now it's going from white to black. I want it to be a radial gradient because I obviously want it to sort of look diffused out to the sides. If you're doing an object that's actually touching the ground, often I will use a linear gradient because the closer you are to the actual object that is casting the shadow, the sharper and crisper and darker the shadow from that object in theory should be. Now mine is very evenly dispersed because it's just the flat ground down below it, so I don't have to necessarily deal with that right now, but just know that that's there if you ever need it. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to change all of this to black. Then, if you notice, so these are your little gradient sliders. They used to call them markers. This is where you can pick whatever color you want. Obviously, it's a shadow. I want it to be black. At any point, you can also change the amount of opacity, not just the color. So I can go in here and easily click to 0. And you'll notice, all right, well, then my shadow's not really lining up, and I've got these crisp edges. So then you've got to go manipulate the shape of that radial shadow, and it does get tricky, and you kind of just need to be patient because you can get over these little spots. And look at how many different options my mouse is showing up. So you kind of got to take your time, pull that guy in, pull him back down. Not bad. It's close, but it's really dark. Obviously that would not, your shadow's not like a complete black ever. You've got to be able to see a little bit through it, even if the ground is just white, or if you've got grass, or if you've got a pattern, whatever. So one of the tricks I always do, and I've learned this from Photoshop, is you always need to change the layer type to multiply. So you do that kind of unintuitively in Illustrator. You do that through the opacity. So you go over here where it says normal and you can change it to multiply. You're not going to see a big difference on mine, but if you've got any kind of background, changing this from normal to multiply is going to help those blacks sink into whatever your background is instead of floating like a little fog. I'm sure some of you, if you've worked with gradients, have noticed that little fog before. So multiply. I can also then turn down the opacity. And whoops, didn't mean to do that. You kind of just have to manipulate it. I want a super, super subtle shadow for my branding, so I'm really going to push it back. At any point, you can grab your gradient tool again and get back in here and kind of see what you're working with, which still looks good. Sometimes I manipulate this center gradient slider. It kind of just means I want more or less of one of the colors. So you can kind of manipulate that in either place. Notice I'm doing it either in my gradient window or on the actual object with my gradient tool. So I'm pretty happy with that. Like I said, I went this super, super soft, subtle shadow. With any shadow, I honestly really love it the way it is, but with any shadow, you so often need to address some form of light source. So this is a little quick lesson on how I would do that in a similar gradient. So I'm going to make a background shape. I am going to give it a slight color just so I can see it, and then I'm going to use Command Shift left bracket to force it behind everything else. So all that did was take it in my layer and move it down to the bottom, which is great. So you can also lock, which is probably a good idea at any point. So now the only thing I have open is just this background. Or we can also add a new layer, call it BG for background, move it down, and then I like to cut, Command X, click into that layer, and then I like to paste in place. The command is Command Shift V. If you forget that, you can always go to Edit, Paste in Place. I use this all the time for so many things when I'm reorganizing. So right here, I'm going to call this logo. Staying organized is going to help you along the way, and I'm going to lock it. So that's just there floating and cute. And now I can come in and create whatever kind of light source you want. I want to show a little bit of lightness coming from above the light source so that it sort of represents the light up above it casting this shadow. Okay, so I'm going to get in here and you kind of got to just start playing. So first things first, I'm going to swap my sides. So that just made sense to me. And I'm also going to turn this back on. It's not that I want it to be, that color, but and then I'm going to come in and choose a really subtle gray. I'm going to choose a really subtle gray for this one as well. I'm even going to glance into, yeah, that looks good. Then I'm going to come in here and I want to give it a lighter color. I want it really, if you ever add an extra, pull them off. I want to make this white, like pure, pure white. And now it's already starting to take a little shape. Just that subtle, subtle gradient. Like I love how it just draws your eye right to the center. The very center, which is my logo, and the focus has the blackest black, the lightest light, and then it's just this kind of illusion for the eye. It's not really giving us much, but I love it. So you can come in here and then you can manipulate it again, just like we did the other, but take your time, work around with it. I'm going to keep this one circular. I want that up there. And what I really want to do is kind of manipulate where this center mark ends. Very close to that. And I actually kind of want to consider it maybe even smaller because I want it to be more at the top and not the entire rectangle. So that's a little bit more of where I'm going. I like that, but I do not like how sharp it is. So at that point I can go in. You can just manipulate whatever kind of pieces you want, and you have to be really careful. So that's close to how I would like it. I want a little bit to cast on the ground because that's obviously how that shadow exists is because of this light. And then for me, it's a little too dark in the gray. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to get into my grayscale and I'm going to beef this really far down. It was close, but now I can't see it at all. And that's pretty close. And now you can see how easy it is to just sort of play and keep playing until you get a look that you really love. So I hope you like this tutorial. If you like it, please subscribe and hit like and let me know if you want to see something else. Thanks.